She woke up early that morning with the sun barely peeking through the curtains. The soft light fell across her room, making everything look calm and peaceful. She took a deep breath, feeling the excitement and nervousness swirl together. Today was not just any other school day. Today she was going to bring something very special for lunch, something her father had carefully taught her to make. It was not just food. It was a part of who she was and a reflection of the time, patience, and discipline her father had spent training her. She dressed neatly, tying her hair back, and double-checked the small container holding her meal. Every item inside was prepared exactly as her father had instructed, from the way the rice was packed to the perfect arrangement of each piece of protein and vegetables. Her father had always believed in structure and precision. Ever since she was young, he had shared small lessons about life, discipline, and respect through everyday activities. Cooking was just one of the ways he taught her, and over time she had developed a deep sense of pride in the skills he had passed down. Today, as she held the container, she felt that pride more than ever. She had prepared it with care, and she wanted to show that to the world, even if only in the small space of her school cafeteria. Walking to school, she felt the familiar rhythm of her steps. The streets were buzzing with morning activity. Cars honked, people chatted, and birds flitted across the trees. She clutched her lunch close, imagining the moment she would open it and enjoy every bite. It wasn't just about eating, it was about sharing a part of herself and her father's teachings. She smiled quietly at the thought. She had always been careful to follow the rules, to be polite, and to work hard. She had learned that respect and preparation often mattered more than anything else. When she entered the school, the hallways were filled with students chatting, lockers slamming, and teachers guiding the flow of movement. She noticed a few familiar faces smiling at her, some waving, some nodding. She returned their gestures politely, feeling the comfort of being known and accepted in her small circle. Yet, she couldn't ignore the tension that sometimes lingered in other corners of the school. There were teachers who looked at her differently, teachers who seemed to see her only through the lens of their assumptions, rather than her actual actions or character. She had learned to navigate those spaces carefully, staying focused on her work and her goals. Her first class passed quickly, filled with the usual lessons and discussions. She tried to concentrate, but a small part of her mind kept drifting to the lunch she had prepared. She wondered what her classmates might think. Would they notice the care and skill put into it, or would it be dismissed as just another meal? She pushed the thought aside, reminding herself that she had prepared it for herself first, and for her father's pride second. No one could take that away from her. As the morning bell rang for lunch, she walked to the cafeteria, holding her container with both hands as if it were a treasure. The cafeteria was loud, filled with chatter and laughter, trays clattering, and smells of all kinds of food blending together. She found her usual spot, a small table where she often sat alone, or with a few friends who appreciated her quiet nature. She set her container down carefully, making sure not to jostle the food inside. Everything was arranged perfectly, just as her father had taught her. She took a moment to admire it before opening it, appreciating the colors, the textures, and the effort that had gone into every detail. Just as she was about to take the first bite, she noticed a teacher approaching. She didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was someone checking on the students or walking through the cafeteria as part of their routine. But as the teacher came closer, she saw the expression on her face. A mix of annoyance and something else she couldn't quite place. The teacher's eyes fell on her meal, and a sharp frown crossed her face. Her heart sank a little, though she tried to remain composed. She had faced judgment before, but this felt different. This felt personal. The teacher stopped right in front of her table, crossing her arms and looking down at the container. She made a dismissive noise and shook her head, as if the effort that went into preparing the meal meant nothing at all. The girl's hands tightened around the edge of the table, and she felt a knot forming in her stomach. She had been taught to respect authority and remain calm, no matter what. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of those lessons. She could handle this. She had handled many challenges before, and this was just another test of patience and poise. Without warning, the teacher reached out and picked up the container. The girl's heart raced as she tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. She opened her mouth to explain, to defend the care and effort put into the meal, but the words wouldn't come out. The teacher lifted the container, looked inside briefly, and then, to the girl's horror, set it aside and discarded the meal. It slid off the table and onto the floor, the colorful arrangement of food scattered and ruined. The cafeteria seemed to quiet for a moment as a few students turned to watch, their eyes wide with surprise. Whispers spread like wildfire, and she felt all eyes on her, some curious, some judgmental, and some sympathetic. She stared at the mess on the floor, her chest tight, her pride wounded. She remembered all the mornings she had spent preparing the meal, the careful steps, the attention to detail, the way her father had guided her hands. It wasn't just food. It was a symbol of her discipline, her upbringing, and the values she carried with her every day. And now it was gone, treated with disregard, and she felt powerless to stop it. She took another deep breath, trying to steady herself. She reminded herself of the lessons her father had taught her about patience, respect, and handling injustice with dignity. It was not fair, she knew that, but she had to stay composed. Some students whispered quietly among themselves, giving her sympathetic glances. A few looked down at their own trays, unsure whether to intervene. The teacher seemed satisfied, as if her point had been made, and started to walk away, leaving the girl sitting at the table, staring at the ruined meal. She felt a surge of emotions: anger, sadness, humiliation, and confusion. Yet, somewhere deep inside, she also felt determination. She had learned to face challenges with courage, and this was no different. She would not let this moment define her. She would find a way to stand tall, to show that her skills, her discipline, and her pride could not be erased by someone else's ignorance. As she sat there, trying to gather her thoughts, she noticed a movement near the cafeteria door. Her father appeared, tall and commanding, his presence immediately noticeable. Students turned to look, sensing the authority and seriousness he carried. Her heart leapt with relief and hope. She had not called him. She hadn't even considered that he might appear. And yet, here he was, seemingly sensing that something was wrong. Her eyes met his, and she felt a wave of reassurance wash over her. He walked toward her with steady, purposeful steps, and the tension in the room shifted. The teacher, still unaware of who was approaching, continued her path, but her confident demeanor began to falter slightly as she noticed the man walking toward her student. Her father reached the table, looking down at the scattered meal and then at his daughter. She could see his disappointment, but it was calm and controlled. He crouched slightly to meet her eye level and gave her a small, reassuring nod. It was a silent message, telling her that he was there, that he understood, and that he would handle what needed to be handled. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. The presence of her father, the man who had taught her discipline and pride, changed the entire atmosphere. She straightened her back and prepared herself for what was about to unfold. The quiet hum of the cafeteria, the whispers of the students, and the frown of the teacher all combined into a moment that she knew would be remembered by everyone present. The first part of the day had started with hope, routine, and preparation, only to be interrupted by prejudice and disrespect. Yet, in that moment, the young girl felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't realized before. Her father's arrival signaled that she was not alone, that her efforts were recognized, and that justice had a chance to be served. She sat at the table, poised and ready, as the scene around her shifted from humiliation to anticipation. This was just the beginning of the confrontation, but she felt a spark of confidence. She had faced challenges before, and she would face this one too, guided by the lessons of her father and the strength she had nurtured within herself. The teacher stood frozen for a moment as the father approached. He had a presence that seemed to fill the room without even trying. His posture was straight, his shoulders squared, and his eyes calm but sharp. Students around them sensed the change in energy immediately. The whispers stopped, and the air felt heavier, almost as if the room had paused to watch what would happen next. The young girl sat quietly at the table, her hands folded in her lap, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. She knew that her father was someone who demanded respect, and she trusted him completely. The father looked down at the ruined meal, then back at the teacher. His voice was steady and controlled when he finally spoke. What happened here? It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made everyone pay attention. The teacher's eyes flickered toward him, a hint of nervousness appearing for the first time. She tried to respond, saying something about school rules and appropriateness, but her words sounded weak and uncertain. He didn't interrupt, just listened carefully, letting her stumble over her own excuses. Every student nearby could feel the tension building, and many of them leaned slightly forward, eager to see what would happen next. The young girl's father then crouched slightly to meet her eyes, giving her a reassuring look. She felt a wave of calm wash over her. His presence alone reminded her of all the lessons he had taught her. Patience, discipline, and the importance of standing tall in the face of injustice. She straightened in her chair, taking a deep breath, ready to support him in whatever way he needed. It wasn't just about the meal anymore. It was about respect, pride, and the values her father had instilled in her. The teacher shifted uncomfortably, sensing that her usual authority had been challenged. She had never been confronted like this, especially not in front of students. The father's eyes held a quiet intensity, and there was no trace of anger, only controlled disappointment. This meal, he began, his tone firm but calm, was prepared with care, with training, and with respect. It represents lessons learned, discipline practiced, and pride in one's skills. It is not just food to be discarded without thought. His words hung in the air, clear and precise. The students listened closely, some nodding subtly, understanding the weight of his message even if they did not fully grasp all the details. The teacher tried to interject, saying that she didn't see it that way, that it was just a meal and rules were rules. But the father held up a hand, signaling her to pause. This is about more than rules, he continued. It's about respect for the effort someone puts into something, about acknowledging skill, and about teaching values instead of tearing them down. Ignoring those lessons is what allows ignorance and prejudice to grow. His words were calm but firm, and each one seemed to resonate throughout the cafeteria. The young girl felt a sense of pride swell within her. She realized that her father was not just defending a meal. He was defending her upbringing, her dignity, and the lessons that had shaped her into who she was. Some students began whispering to each other, glancing at the teacher and then at the father. They could feel the shift in dynamics, understanding that this was more than a simple school incident. They noticed how the father's calm authority contrasted sharply with the teacher's uneasy stance. The young girl's classmates who were sitting nearby exchanged looks of admiration and support, though no one spoke out loud yet. The atmosphere was charged, and it was clear that something important was unfolding. The teacher finally spoke again, her voice quieter, almost hesitant. She mentioned rules about what could be brought to school, how meals were expected to conform to certain standards, and other reasons to justify her actions. But the father remained calm, addressing each point carefully and respectfully. Rules are important, he said, but they should not be used to undermine someone's efforts or to enforce personal biases. The goal of education should be to guide, support, and teach respect for diversity and skill. Dismissing someone's work out of prejudice does not align with those goals. Each word was deliberate, and the students felt the weight of his reasoning. It was clear that he valued fairness and integrity above all else. The young girl listened intently, absorbing every word. She thought about all the mornings spent learning these skills from her father, the long hours of practice, and the discipline that had been instilled in her. She realized that this moment, though difficult, was teaching her another lesson. How to face injustice with grace, how to rely on her own values, and how to trust in the support of those who truly cared for her. She felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't expected, knowing that she was not alone, and that her efforts were recognized and respected by someone who mattered deeply. Other teachers and students had started to gather at a distance, curious about the confrontation. Some of them had seen similar incidents in the past, But the father's presence and calm authority made this situation different. People began to notice how the young girl's confidence seemed to grow as her father spoke, and how the teacher, once certain of her position, now appeared uncertain. It was a lesson in itself, showing that respect, preparation, and integrity carried more weight than intimidation or bias. The father continued, explaining the significance of discipline and training in their lives. He spoke about how the meal represented more than nutrition. It was a practice in precision, patience, and respect for oneself and others. He shared briefly how he had taught his daughter not just to prepare meals, but to understand the value of effort, attention to detail, and the pride that comes from doing something well. The students listened, captivated by the clarity and purpose behind his words. They could see how much the young girl had learned from her father, and how deeply she respected him. It was more than just a lesson about food. It was a lesson about life. The teacher shifted again, now clearly uncomfortable. She had expected a simple routine moment in the cafeteria, maybe a small confrontation, but not this. She had not anticipated being challenged with logic, respect, and authority all at once. The father's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with her earlier actions, and she began to realize that her behavior had crossed a line. The students could see the change in her expression, and some of them even whispered softly among themselves, noticing how the balance of power had shifted. The young girl's father finally looked at her, giving her a small nod of encouragement. It was a silent message, letting her know that she had handled herself well, that she had been patient, and that her values were strong. She felt a warmth of gratitude and pride. She had learned an important lesson that day. Standing up for oneself did not always require shouting or anger. Sometimes, it required calmness, dignity, and trust in those who supported you. She realized that the skills her father had taught her were not limited to practical tasks. They were lessons for life, preparing her for moments exactly like this. The students around them seemed to understand the message as well. They saw the importance of standing by one's values, the power of calm authority, and the impact of respect. Even some of the quieter students began to feel inspired, recognizing that discipline and integrity mattered far more than fitting into expectations or being overlooked. The atmosphere in the cafeteria had shifted completely. What had started as a moment of humiliation had transformed into a powerful lesson in courage, patience, and self-respect. Finally, the father addressed the teacher one last time, emphasizing the importance of awareness and understanding in guiding students. He spoke about how educators had the responsibility to nurture, encourage, and recognize the efforts of every student, regardless of their background or the origin of their skills. He reminded her that small acts of prejudice or disregard could leave lasting marks on young minds, and that true leadership involved guiding with respect, patience, and fairness. His words were firm but not cruel, instructive but not humiliating. They carried the weight of experience and wisdom, and everyone in the cafeteria could sense that. As the father straightened and prepared to leave, the teacher's demeanor had shifted completely. She was no longer confident or dismissive. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the mistake she had made. The students watched as the young girl and her father shared a small, reassuring glance, understanding that they had faced the challenge together and come out stronger. The father's presence had turned a moment of injustice into a lesson that everyone could learn from, and the young girl felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that went far beyond the ruined meal. She sat back, taking a moment to breathe and reflect. The incident had tested her patience and composure, but it had also reinforced the values her father had instilled in her. She realized that her discipline, her pride in her skills, and her ability to remain calm under pressure were exactly what had helped her navigate the situation. She felt grateful for her father's guidance, for his calm authority, and for the lessons that extended far beyond the kitchen or the school cafeteria. Today, she had learned that standing up for oneself, guided by integrity and discipline, could turn even the most challenging moments into powerful life lessons. The young girl took a deep breath, trying to calm the mixture of emotions that churned inside her. Humiliation, anger, and disbelief were still fresh, but she also felt a renewed sense of confidence. Her father's presence had shifted the moment, giving her a support she could lean on without words. She watched him as he stood near the table, observing the teacher with quiet authority. She had learned from him that sometimes strength was silent, that it could be felt without needing to be shouted. And right now, that strength radiated from him in waves, steady and unshakable. The teacher, now visibly unsettled, attempted to regain control, adjusting her posture as if trying to remember her usual composure. She cleared her throat and spoke, explaining her actions as if to justify herself, but her voice lacked conviction. The students in the cafeteria listened, some whispering to each other, noticing the shift in balance. Where the teacher had once seemed confident and untouchable, she now appeared small, unsure, and on the defensive. The young girl sat quietly, feeling her heart pound with a mix of fear and determination. She remembered the lessons her father had taught her about patience and strategy. Sometimes the best response was to stay calm and let reason do the talking. Her father responded calmly to the teacher's words, addressing each of her points with clarity and respect. He explained how the meal was a product of training, discipline, and effort, and how discarding it had more than just a superficial impact. It had sent a message of disrespect, one that undermined the values he had instilled in his daughter. He spoke of lessons in pride, attention to detail, and honor, emphasizing that these qualities were cultivated through guidance, patience, and practice. Every student in the cafeteria could feel the weight of his words, the sincerity and authority that accompanied them. Some nodded quietly, understanding on a deeper level than they had expected. The teacher's defenses began to crumble further. Her attempts to explain her behavior fell flat, her excuses sounding hollow in the face of such calm and reasoned authority. She shifted from foot to foot, fidgeting slightly, as the students and other staff watched. Even those who had not paid much attention before now realized that something important was happening. The father's presence, his calm demeanor, and his unwavering respect for both his daughter and the situation were turning the cafeteria into a place of learning that went far beyond the regular curriculum. It was a lesson in courage, dignity, and standing up for what was right. Meanwhile, the young girl sat with her hands folded, feeling the quiet strength of her father bolster her own confidence. She had spent years learning from him, not just practical skills, but life lessons about resilience, respect, and how to respond to injustice. She realized that she had internalized much of this guidance already, that her ability to remain composed and to trust in her father's presence was a testament to everything he had taught her. The initial shock of seeing her meal discarded still lingered, but it had been replaced with a sense of resolve. She understood that this was not the end, but rather a moment that could define how she carried herself in the future. Other students began to murmur among themselves, their conversations quiet but noticeable. Some expressed surprise at how calmly the father addressed the situation, while others whispered about the significance of the young girl's discipline and poise. They saw how her father's teachings had shaped her, how respect and patience could confront unfairness in a way that anger or shouting could not. Even the teacher, who had initially acted without consideration, was beginning to see the impact of the lesson being demonstrated before her. It was a moment of reflection, one that exposed not only her prejudice but also the importance of understanding and valuing the efforts of others. The father continued, carefully addressing the principles behind the actions that had upset him and his daughter. He spoke about respect for effort, the importance of acknowledging skill, and the role of mentorship in cultivating values. He explained that discarding someone's work without understanding the effort behind it was a disservice, not just to the individual but to the larger community. His words were clear, deliberate, and accessible, allowing students of all ages to grasp the essence of what he was teaching. It was more than a defense of a meal. It was a demonstration of how to approach life with integrity, patience, and fairness. As he spoke, the young girl felt a renewed connection to her own values. She understood that her father was not just protecting her pride, but also teaching her an invaluable lesson in resilience. She realized that moments like these were tests of character, opportunities to apply everything she had learned over the years. Her posture straightened, her hands relaxed in her lap, and she felt a quiet sense of empowerment. She was not just a student in this cafeteria. She was a young person learning how to navigate a complex world with grace and dignity. The teacher, now clearly uncomfortable, shifted her stance and looked around at the students. Some avoided eye contact, unsure of how to react, while others stared quietly, taking in the unfolding lesson. It became apparent that the balance of authority had changed. The father's calm, reasoned approach had not only defended his daughter but had also highlighted the teacher's biases and the consequences of acting without thought or respect. The students began to understand the power of discipline, preparation, and controlled response, and the young girl felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that the lessons she had learned from her father were being reinforced in a real-world situation. She watched as her father concluded his points, emphasizing the importance of respect, fairness, and understanding in every interaction. He spoke about how educators had a responsibility to nurture students, to recognize their efforts, and to guide them with empathy and wisdom. His words resonated deeply with everyone in the cafeteria, creating a moment of reflection that extended far beyond the immediate incident. Even the teacher seemed to absorb the message, her expression softening slightly as she considered the impact of her actions. After a brief pause, the father turned to his daughter, giving her a small, reassuring nod. It was a silent acknowledgement of her composure, her patience, and her ability to trust in his guidance. She returned the nod, feeling a sense of pride and gratitude. The moment had been challenging, but it had also reinforced the bond between them and the lessons that had been instilled over the years. She understood that strength was not always loud or confrontational. Sometimes, it was calm, measured, and rooted in integrity. As the cafeteria began to return to its usual rhythm, the young girl remained seated, reflecting on the experience. She thought about the importance of standing up for oneself, the value of preparation and discipline, and the lessons learned from moments of adversity. She realized that her father's guidance extended beyond the classroom and kitchen. It was a framework for approaching life with confidence, respect, and resilience. She felt empowered, knowing that she had faced a challenging situation with grace, and that she had the support of someone who believed in her completely. The students around her gradually resumed their activities, but the impact of the confrontation lingered. Some whispered quietly, sharing their impressions, while others glanced at the young girl and her father with newfound respect. The teacher, now subdued, moved back toward her usual duties, her demeanor changed by the experience. She had been confronted not with anger or hostility, but with reason, patience, and a demonstration of values that could not be ignored. The young girl felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the lesson had been learned in a way that was constructive rather than destructive. In that moment, the young girl understood that life would continue to present challenges, moments of unfairness, and situations where she might feel powerless. But she also realized that with discipline, preparation, and the guidance of those who cared for her, she could face anything with strength and dignity. She looked at her father once more, seeing the calm authority and unwavering support that had carried them through the incident. She knew that this was not just a memory of a discarded meal. It was a lesson in courage, integrity, and the power of standing tall, even when the odds seemed against her. The young girl sat quietly at the table, her hands folded on her lap, as the buzz of the cafeteria slowly returned. Students were whispering to one another, exchanging glances that mixed curiosity and admiration. The air was different now, heavier with the weight of what had just occurred, yet lighter because the tension had shifted. She felt her father's presence beside her like a shield, a silent support that made the world feel safer. He had not raised his voice, had not acted aggressively, but his authority had been felt and recognized by everyone around. She realized that his calm strength had taught her a powerful lesson, that influence does not always come from loudness or force, but from composure and conviction. As the father looked around the cafeteria, his eyes met those of other teachers and staff. There were subtle nods and shifts in posture as they acknowledged the gravity of the situation. Some students were still trying to process what had happened, glancing back and forth between the young girl, her father, and the teacher. It was clear that the usual order of the cafeteria had been disrupted, not by anger, but by a demonstration of principles, respect, fairness, and discipline. The young girl could feel the energy in the room, the way people seemed to respect her father's words, even if they had initially ignored her presence. She felt proud, not just for herself, but for the values he had instilled in her. The teacher, still nearby, had begun to regain some composure, though her demeanor was subdued and reflective. She avoided direct confrontation now, realizing that the initial confidence she had carried into the cafeteria had been misplaced. The father approached her calmly, speaking in a measured tone. He reminded her that teaching was more than enforcing rules. It was about guidance, mentorship, and nurturing students' skills and values. He emphasized that every action carried consequences, and that dismissing effort without understanding it could harm a student's sense of self and the learning environment. His words were firm yet instructive, carrying the weight of experience and wisdom. Students watched, some leaning in subtly, catching every word as if it were a lesson meant for them too. The young girl observed her father carefully, absorbing the nuances of how he handled the situation. He did not yell, he did not demean anyone, but he made it unmistakably clear that what had happened was wrong. She realized that true authority was not about dominance, but about the ability to guide and correct with dignity and respect. The experience was teaching her more than just how to stand up to unfair treatment. It was showing her the importance of patience, clarity, and maintaining integrity even under pressure. She felt a quiet sense of empowerment grow within her as she recognized these lessons unfolding before her eyes. Other students began to react subtly to the situation. Some whispered in admiration about the young girl's composure, while others discussed the father's calm yet commanding presence. They seemed to understand, at least on some level, the weight of what had just occurred. Even students who had initially been indifferent were now observing, their attention captured by the contrast between the teacher's discomfort and the father's composed authority. It was a powerful moment, demonstrating that true influence came from knowledge, self-control, and respect rather than fear or prejudice. The young girl felt a sense of validation, knowing that her values and her father's teachings were being recognized, even if silently, by those around her. The father then shifted his focus slightly, addressing the broader lesson for the students in the cafeteria. He spoke about the importance of recognizing effort, valuing skill, and approaching situations with empathy and understanding. He explained that everyone had different experiences and strengths, and that dismissing or belittling someone's work could have lasting consequences. His words were simple, clear, and accessible, but their impact was profound. The young girl listened intently, appreciating how he had turned a moment of personal affront into a teaching opportunity for everyone present. She realized that this was a continuation of the lessons she had been learning at home, now applied in a real-world context, making them even more meaningful. As he spoke, the young girl's father glanced at her, offering a small smile and a reassuring nod. It was a silent message that he was proud of her patience, her composure, and her ability to trust in his guidance. She felt a warmth of gratitude and pride, understanding that the support he provided went beyond mere presence. It was a foundation upon which she could build confidence and resilience. She had faced a challenging situation and had done so with dignity, guided by the principles her father had instilled in her. The experience had strengthened her understanding of how to navigate adversity with calmness and integrity. The teacher, now listening more attentively, began to understand the impact of her actions. She shifted her stance slightly, a gesture that revealed both awareness and regret. The father's words had highlighted not just the importance of respect for individual effort, but also the broader responsibility of educators to nurture and support their students. The young girl watched as the teacher's expression softened, recognizing that her initial response had been hasty and unjust. It was a moment of reflection, showing that even those in authority could learn when confronted with calm reasoning and integrity. Throughout the cafeteria, students began to settle back into their routines, but the lesson lingered in the air. Some continued to whisper about what they had witnessed, while others observed quietly, processing the significance of the father's intervention. The young girl felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that the situation had been transformed from one of humiliation into a meaningful experience for everyone present. She understood that the incident would remain with her, reinforcing the principles of patience, discipline, and respect she had been taught. Her father, sensing that the moment had reached its conclusion, turned his attention back to her. He spoke softly, acknowledging her composure and reinforcing the importance of carrying oneself with dignity in the face of adversity. He reminded her that life would present challenges, but that the lessons she had learned at home and the way she had applied them today would guide her through future difficulties. She absorbed his words, feeling a deep sense of reassurance and empowerment. The experience had strengthened not only her understanding of her own values, but also her confidence in navigating the world with integrity. As they prepared to leave the cafeteria, the young girl felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that the discarded meal, once a symbol of humiliation, had become a catalyst for growth and learning. The father's guidance had turned a moment of personal affront into an opportunity for reflection and education, demonstrating the power of calm authority, empathy, and respect. She felt grateful for the lessons he had taught her, both in skill and in character, and recognized the profound impact of his support in shaping her response to adversity. The students continued their day, some glancing back occasionally, reflecting on the events they had witnessed. The teacher, now more aware of her responsibilities and the consequences of her actions, returned to her duties with a subdued demeanor, carrying the weight of the lesson she had received. The young girl, walking alongside her father, felt a sense of pride and confidence that had been strengthened through the experience. She knew that she had faced a challenge with dignity, supported by the guidance and principles instilled by her father, and had emerged stronger for it. By the time they left the cafeteria, the young girl understood that the lessons of the day extended far beyond the simple act of bringing a meal. They were lessons in courage, integrity, patience, and respect, principles that would guide her throughout life. She felt empowered, knowing that she had faced adversity with composure, that she had trusted in the support of her father, and that she had applied the values she had been taught in a meaningful way. The experience had transformed what could have been a humiliating moment into a powerful affirmation of character, discipline, and personal growth. The young girl and her father walked down the hallway, the noise of the cafeteria fading behind them. The hum of students moving between classes and the occasional call of a teacher echoed through the corridors. But the intensity of what had just happened still lingered. She could feel a mix of emotions inside her. Relief that her father had been there, pride in her own composure, and a lingering sadness for the humiliation she had endured. Yet, above all, she felt a sense of empowerment. She had faced an unfair situation and had done so with dignity, guided by the principles her father had taught her. As they walked, her father spoke softly, explaining more about why moments like these were important. "Life will challenge you," he said, "sometimes in ways you cannot anticipate. How you respond defines your character more than the challenge itself." She listened carefully, absorbing his words and understanding that the lesson extended far beyond a simple meal or a single teacher's prejudice. It was about integrity, resilience, and the courage to stand by one's values even when it was difficult. They reached an empty hallway near the library, giving them a moment of privacy. Her father crouched slightly to meet her eye level, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I am proud of how you handled yourself today," he said. "You stayed calm, you trusted in your values, and you allowed respect to guide your actions. That is more powerful than anger or revenge." She nodded, feeling a swell of pride and gratitude. These words reinforced everything she had been learning at home and in school, strengthening her understanding of how to navigate challenges with grace and confidence. The young girl thought back to the moment when the teacher had discarded her meal. She remembered the shock, the embarrassment, and the rush of emotions that had followed. At first, she had felt powerless, unsure how to respond, but the presence of her father had changed everything. His calm authority had not only defended her, but also transformed the situation into a lesson for everyone in the cafeteria. She realized that her father's guidance had been preparing her for this very moment, teaching her that strength often came through patience and wisdom rather than confrontation. Her father continued speaking, emphasizing the importance of understanding and empathy. "People may act out of ignorance or bias," he said, "but that does not mean you must respond in kind. Recognizing the cause of their actions allows you to respond with clarity and integrity. She thought about the teacher who had acted without understanding or respect. It was clear now that the teacher's actions had more to do with her own prejudices than with anything the young girl had done. This insight helped her release some of the anger she had felt, replacing it with a determination to act thoughtfully in the future. They paused near the library doors, and her father smiled gently. "You have learned an important lesson today," he said. "Not just about meals or school rules, but about how to carry yourself in the face of unfairness. You have seen how calm authority, respect, and preparation can transform a difficult moment into a powerful teaching experience." She nodded again, feeling the weight of his words and the depth of their meaning. It was a moment of reflection, one that would stay with her long after the events of the day had passed. The young girl thought about the students in the cafeteria and how they had witnessed the exchange. She imagined how they might carry the lesson with them, understanding the importance of respect, preparation, and integrity. Some may have learned from her father's example, while others may have reflected on their own actions and attitudes. She realized that even small moments, when handled thoughtfully, could have a ripple effect, influencing the people around her in meaningful ways. The experience had shown her that standing up for what is right does not always require loudness or anger. It can be done with composure, clarity, and dignity. Her father began walking with her toward her next class, continuing the conversation. He spoke about the importance of applying these lessons in everyday life, not just in dramatic moments. Every day presents opportunities to practice patience, respect, and integrity, he said. Whether it's a small task at school or a larger challenge in life, the principles remain the same. You have shown today that you are capable of handling adversity with grace. She listened intently, feeling a sense of confidence grow within her. She understood that the skills and values she had learned at home were tools she could rely on, helping her navigate not just school life but the broader world as well. As they reached her classroom, she paused for a moment, looking back in thought. She thought about the teacher and how her actions had initially caused pain and embarrassment. But now, with her father's guidance, she saw the experience differently. It was no longer just an act of injustice. It was a teaching moment, one that reinforced the values she held dear and the lessons she had learned from her father. She realized that even negative experiences could be transformed into opportunities for growth and understanding if approached with the right mindset. The classroom was quiet. Students focused on their work as she entered. She took her seat, feeling a calm sense of purpose. She remembered her father's words about preparation, patience, and integrity, and she felt empowered to apply them in all areas of her life. The humiliation of the discarded meal had been replaced by a sense of strength, knowing that she had faced the situation with dignity and had learned valuable lessons along the way. She felt proud of herself and grateful for her father's guidance, recognizing the profound impact it had on her ability to respond thoughtfully to challenges. Throughout the day, the young girl carried the lessons she had learned in the cafeteria with her. She approached each task with care, paying attention to detail, and maintaining her composure even in stressful situations. She noticed how her confidence influenced those around her, inspiring quiet admiration and respect from her peers. She understood that true strength was not always visible, but it could be felt in the way she carried herself, the choices she made, and the integrity with which she approached every challenge. By the end of the school day, the young girl felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced an unfair situation, maintained her dignity, and learned valuable lessons that would guide her throughout her life. Her father's presence had been a source of strength and guidance, reinforcing the principles of patience, respect, and integrity. She understood that challenges would continue to arise, but she felt prepared to face them with the tools and values she had learned at home and applied in real-world situations. As they left the school together, walking down the familiar streets toward home, she reflected on the day's events. The discarded meal, once a source of humiliation, had become a catalyst for growth and understanding. The experience had strengthened her sense of self, deepened her bond with her father, and reinforced the importance of values like patience, respect, and integrity. She felt empowered, knowing that she had faced adversity with composure, that she had trusted in her father's guidance, and that she had applied the lessons she had been taught in a meaningful way. By the time they reached home, the young girl felt a sense of peace and confidence. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, but she had the tools, the guidance, and the values needed to navigate them successfully. The experience of the discarded meal had become more than just a moment of personal affront. It had become a defining lesson in courage, integrity, and the power of standing tall in the face of adversity. She felt ready for whatever came next, knowing that she could face the world with strength, dignity, and the support of her father's wisdom. The young girl stepped into the evening sunlight, walking beside her father with a sense of calm and purpose she had not felt before. The day had been long, filled with lessons, challenges, and moments that tested her patience and composure. She reflected on everything that had happened, from the humiliation in the cafeteria to the quiet authority of her father that had turned the situation into a powerful teaching moment. She realized that the events of the day were more than just about a discarded meal. They were about courage, dignity, and the values that shaped her character. As they walked through the familiar streets toward home, her father spoke gently, pointing out small details in the neighborhood, the way people interacted, and the lessons that could be found in everyday life. He reminded her that life was full of moments, big and small, where patience, respect, and integrity mattered. Every day offers opportunities to grow, he said. Even in situations that seem unfair or challenging, the choices you make define who you are. Today, you made choices that reflected your values, and that is something to be proud of. She listened intently, feeling a warmth of pride and reassurance. His words were simple, yet they carried weight, reinforcing everything she had learned at home and in school. The young girl thought about the teacher, the one who had discarded her meal. She understood now that the teacher's actions had been influenced by prejudice and ignorance. While it had caused her pain in the moment, the experience had also given her a chance to apply the lessons her father had taught her. She had remained composed, trusted in her values, and allowed her father's calm authority to guide the situation toward resolution. She realized that even difficult experiences could become powerful lessons if approached with patience and understanding. As they continued walking, the father spoke about the importance of reflection. It's not just about reacting in the moment, he said. It's about thinking, understanding, and choosing your response carefully. That is how you grow stronger. That is how you turn challenges into opportunities. She nodded, understanding the depth of his words. She realized that the day had been a test, not just of her composure, but of her ability to internalize and act upon the values she had been taught. She felt grateful for the guidance that had prepared her for this moment, knowing that it would serve her well in the future. The young girl's mind wandered back to the cafeteria, remembering the way the students had reacted. Some had whispered in admiration, some had observed quietly, and some had reflected on their own actions and attitudes. She realized that her experience had affected more than just herself. It had influenced the people around her, teaching them lessons in patience, respect, and the power of calm authority. She felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that what had been a moment of personal affront had transformed into a broader lesson that others could learn from. Her father paused for a moment, looking down at her with a gentle smile. "You have handled yourself with dignity today," he said. "Remember that strength is not always loud. It can be quiet, steady, and measured. It is felt in the choices you make and the values you uphold. Never forget that." She absorbed his words, feeling a deep sense of empowerment. She understood that the principles she had learned at home were not just guidelines for behavior. They were tools for navigating life, for facing challenges with confidence, and for maintaining integrity in every situation. They walked past familiar landmarks, the small park where children played, the corner store where neighbors greeted one another, and the quiet streets lined with trees. The young girl reflected on how the lessons of the day could apply to all aspects of life, not just school. She thought about how she might handle future challenges, how she could support others, and how she could remain true to her values even when confronted with unfairness or prejudice. The day's events had strengthened her understanding of herself and her ability to respond thoughtfully to difficult situations. Her father spoke again, this time about responsibility. "When you are treated unfairly, you have a choice," he said. "You can respond with anger, or you can respond with clarity and integrity. Choosing the latter is not always easy, but it is always powerful. You have the ability to influence the world around you, not through force, but through the way you carry yourself and the values you uphold." She nodded, realizing that his words were not just about the incident in the cafeteria, but about life as a whole. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that the principles she had applied today would guide her in all future challenges. As they approached their home, the young girl felt a sense of closure. The events of the day had tested her, but they had also provided invaluable lessons. She understood that humiliation and unfair treatment could be transformed into opportunities for growth, learning, and empowerment. She felt proud of herself for maintaining composure, proud of her father for his calm guidance, and proud of the lessons they had both imparted and learned. The discarded meal, once a source of distress, had become a symbol of resilience, integrity, and the power of standing tall in the face of adversity. At home, the atmosphere was warm and comforting. The young girl reflected on the bond she shared with her father, understanding that his guidance extended beyond practical skills to life lessons that shaped her character. She felt grateful for the discipline, patience, and integrity he had instilled in her, recognizing that these values had been crucial in navigating the challenges of the day. She realized that true strength came not from physical prowess or dominance, but from the ability to remain composed, uphold one's principles, and influence others through respect and understanding. She sat quietly in her room later that evening, replaying the events in her mind. She thought about the teacher, the students, and the lessons she had learned. She understood that every experience, no matter how difficult, carried the potential for growth and learning. The day had been a test of her character, and she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of the principles that guided her life. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had faced adversity with grace, and had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a lesson in dignity and integrity. Her father joined her briefly, offering a few final words of encouragement. "Remember, life will continue to present challenges," he said, "but you now have the tools, the understanding, and the confidence to face them. Trust in yourself, uphold your values, and never underestimate the power of calm authority and integrity." She nodded, feeling a sense of peace and determination. She understood that the day had not just been about a meal, a teacher, or a school incident. It had been about learning how to navigate the world with strength, dignity, and respect. As night fell, the young girl prepared for rest, reflecting on the lessons she had learned and the growth she had experienced. She understood that challenges would continue, but she felt ready to face them with confidence, guided by the values instilled by her father. She realized that life was full of moments that tested patience, integrity, and resilience, and that the way she responded to these moments would define her character. She felt empowered, knowing that she had faced adversity, maintained her composure, and emerged stronger, with a clearer understanding of herself and the principles that guided her. The day's events had transformed a simple school incident into a profound learning experience. The young girl now understood that standing tall, maintaining dignity, and upholding values were the keys to navigating life's challenges. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, confidence, and empowerment, knowing that the lessons she had learned would guide her through future trials. The discarded meal, once a symbol of humiliation, had become a testament to resilience, integrity, and the power of calm authority. She drifted to sleep that night with a sense of peace, pride, and readiness for the life lessons that lay ahead, knowing she had faced a defining moment with courage and grace.